Will TikTok be banned in the United States? That's the question you're seeing all over Twitter today, and the genesis of that being the TikTok CEO being grilled by Congress, or grilled in quotation marks. We'll talk about Congress in just a moment. This coming on the heels, of course, of the British government saying that parliamentary party members can no longer have TikTok on their phones, especially government-issued devices. I think that should be the standard across the board. I think it is here now as well. I don't want any app really that listens in to somebody's conversations being on the phone of anybody around confidential information. I think that's a bad idea just from the start. But I really hate how this question for consumers has boiled down to, well, we don't want the bad guys having our data, like people who are definitely in league with other nations getting access to our information. But it's okay to have the good bad guys having our information, like Mark Zuckerberg and the Meta family of apps, whether it be Instagram or Facebook. I think that's really where we've drawn. Because if you think for a moment, that Meta is not selling our data and information to companies who also do business with unfavorable nations, I think you're kidding yourself. I really am. I think they're just going for the highest bidder there. And whoever that happens to be, and whatever that company happens to do with the data after the fact, if they repackage it, if they use it, if they break it down and analyze it for other people who may be unfriendly or want your information, that's a different story. I think that's absolutely happening. Do I think TikTok should be banned in the United States? Look, personally for me, I don't think I care if the Chinese government knows if I'm watching cat videos on there or not. I don't think our information should be for sale, period, ended. I don't think people should have access to our information, especially unfriendly nations or people who are going to take it and use it against us. That's a non-starter, of course, from the beginning. But I don't know where the line is. I really don't. I don't want to go back to a time where the only choice is between being connected and having our data all over the internet for the highest bidder, or living in a log cabin, having one of those Pine phones or one of those Linux phones where you had to have the physical disconnect button for the Wi-Fi to make sure that you were completely off the grid, or a phone where you have to take the battery out of it at the end of the day to make sure it doesn't even have power to transmit. I lived through the 80s and 90s, okay? I was a child of the 80s and the late 80s and 90s where you had a time where you could physically disconnect yourself from the internet, where you didn't have constant access to information. I don't think the price of access to that, I don't think the price of admission to having access to global information at our fingertips at all times should be that we have absolutely zero right to privacy. I don't think that's an insane ask. And it boils down to those very members of Congress that I mentioned a moment ago. Because if you're looking at those people, the first step has to be the people who are overseeing these industries having some sort of knowledge of the industry they're on the oversight committee for. The questions that were being asked by our elected officials to the TikTok CEO were embarrassing. And this isn't an aberration. It's not unique to just technology stuff or stuff that may be beyond their realm of information. If you go back and you look on C-SPAN, look at the Enron hearings 20 years ago, as the financial industry, they have zero clue. They were sitting there during those Enron hearings pulling their questions out of USA Today articles because they had zero clue about what they were asking about. And I understand in a democracy that's going to happen. It's certainly not something that only the United States has a problem with. It's democracies around the world, because it seems like these elected officials only have one talent and one thing that they're specifically good at, and that's being elected. They got nothing else going for them, usually, in the most cases, especially now. They're good at fundraising, and they're good at getting people to like them just long enough to pull the lever in the voting booth. That's it. That's scary. So when it comes down to where these solutions come from, that are in between just having our data out there for the highest bidder and being completely shut off from the grid, it's going to come down to the consumer, and I think it has to happen on the level of the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store and whatever other place you get your apps. That's where I think it has to come into play. Because as nice as it is to have that little yellow bubble at the top of your screen, or the little green bubble at the top of your screen now on Android and iOS when an app is using either video or the microphone, it's the apps that aren't notifying the OS that they're using the microphone or the video camera that I'm worried about. It's not the ones that play nice and say, you know what, I'm going to ping you because I'm using the microphone. So please tell the user that I'm using their microphone and I can hear what they say. It's not those apps that I'm worried about. If you think you're paranoid when you're driving down the road and you comment on something, and sure enough, when you open Instagram, the next ad that you see happens to be related to what you're talking about. Think you're paranoid? Think you need a tinfoil hat when that happens? Let me tell you something. You're not. It's intentional. Advertising companies pay for that data that you get. And I think the only way out of this, and there's going to have to be a lot of will on the part of the consumer to get this done, a little bit of knowledge and know-how on the part of the people doing the oversight to get this done as well. But I want to see from start to finish what happens to my data. What did you take from me? Who did you sell it to? And what was the end result of the actual ad that I saw? I would like to know what goes into every ad that I see, why you did that, and I think it should be available in every app as the price you pay, or the price they pay rather, to be able to collect that data in an effort to have that app be put in the App Store. You want your app in the App Store from Apple? You want your app in the Google Play Store? That's what you have to be able to do, and it should be on the back end of every app, and every consumer who agrees to whatever in order to use that app should be able to see that information and should have access to that information to just know exactly what was taken from you, what words, what recordings, when, how, and what it resulted in on the back end of the ad you saw. Is that possible? Is that something that they have the will to do? Well, I know they don't have the will to do it. Is that something we'd be able to physically force on them or make a decision by not using apps and all the rest of it? I don't know, but I think at least that's an in-between or something I'd feel better about than just having the choice between being completely out there to the highest bidder or having to shut myself off and live in a lead box in order so no microwaves could get in. There has to be an in-between. It can't just be one or the other. And that's the choice that we seem to be constantly put with or posed with when it comes to just any sort of internet information or our privacy. Let me know your thoughts below if you've made it this far. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until next time, have that Steve-licious day.